to that war-linked Yasukuni shrine and also visited as well. The shrine honors 2.5 million Japanese who were killed while serving in the Japanese military, including 14 convicted Class A war criminals from World War II. The visits have raised strong condemnation from China. China's Foreign Ministry spokesman Hua Chunying said the Yasukuni shrine is a spiritual vehicle and a symbol of the war of aggression. She added that only when Japan honestly faces up to and deeply reflects upon its past history of aggression and truly makes a clean break with militarism can China-Japan relations achieve sound and stable development. Hua said China solemnly urges Japan to deal with relevant issues in a responsible manner and win back the trust of its Asian neighbors and the international community with concrete actions. And back in February of this year, China announced that September the 3rd had been designated as Victory Day in the war against Japanese aggression, and that December the 13th would be a national memorial day. That is for the victims of the 1937 Nanjing massacre. The Chinese government has planned several commemorative events for September the 3rd. Meanwhile, South Korean President Park Geun-hye on Friday also urged Japan to face up to history. She made the remarks during her Liberation Day speech to celebrate the 69th anniversary of the peninsula's liberation from Japanese colonial rule.
Japanese politicians are now pulling the people of the two countries apart. They've brought pain to them. One cannot just cover up or deny historical truth. Future generations will search and find what is inevitably true because the witnesses of history are still with us.
Also on Friday, South Korea's foreign ministry condemned the Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe for sending an offering to the infamous Yasukuni shrine. Several members of Abe's cabinet visited the shrine on Friday. The South Korean foreign ministry said that Japanese politicians' visit to the shrine reflects the country's attempts to whitewash its wartime aggression. Thousands of people gathered in the capital Seoul protesting against the revival of Japan's militarism. And for more from South Korea, we're joined now by our correspondent Shane Ham. Shane, good to have you with us. Now, can you tell us a little bit more about what Park Geun-hye had to say in her speech, and also what the South Korean government is doing to remember this day in the war?
Well, the foreign ministry here, Neela, calling Prime Minister Abe's moves today as, quote, deplorable. But President Park's comments during her speech were pretty much consistent with her administration's position on Japan, in that Japan needs to face up to history in order for bilateral relations to move forward. Now, the president said she wants Japan's leaders to start what she called a new future. However, in order for relations to become future-oriented, these historical issues need to be addressed first. So if you try to interpret the president's comments, the ball is in Japan's court to address these outstanding issues. For example, the issue of compensation for former South Korean sex slaves during World War II, territorial issues, also you have textbook issues as well, in order to see any change in diplomatic policy towards Japan. And only then will we even see a possible bilateral summit between President Park and Prime Minister Abe, because under the current environment, a meeting doesn't seem likely anytime soon. Neela?
And you mentioned some of the tensions or the tricky issues that the two countries are dealing with, but overall, how are relations right now between Japan and South Korea? And also, how could these visits and these offerings to the Yasukuni shrine really impact those relations?
Well, today's actions by Prime Minister Abe and his cabinet members probably won't affect the status of relations significantly. The reason being because bilateral ties are already at one of their worst points in recent memory. But right now, the wartime sexual slavery issue of Korean women and the territorial issue are probably the two biggest issues that need to be addressed at this point. I spoke to an expert on Japanese policy earlier this week, and what he said was that from the South Korean point of view, the only resolution for the sex slave issue would have to end in some sort of written apology from Japan's leadership and some sort of possible monetary compensation. As far as the territorial issue is concerned, from Korea's viewpoint, it isn't even an issue because the islands in dispute are without any doubt under Korean sovereignty. So the fact of the matter is South Korea and Japan share really close ties economically, socially, culturally, but diplomatically relations are pretty much severed. So there are unconfirmed reports that high-ranking officials from both sides are in contact unofficially to try and set up a diplomatic summit, but according to the expert I met at least, we may see a meeting toward the end of President Park's presidential term, which is in 2017, but not anytime soon.
All right, Shane, many thanks indeed. Our correspondent Shane Hom coming to us from Seoul. And opposition parties in Japan have called for Japanese to self-reflect on the 69th anniversary of the country's surrender. This is in stark contrast to the ruling Liberal Democratic Party stance, that is to speed up legislation to allow Japan's forces to be deployed overseas. Manri Kaeda, president of the Democratic Party of Japan, says his party will adhere to an ideal that does not threaten other countries. He said Japan should take responsibility for the peace and stability of the Asia-Pacific region. Yorihisa Matsuno, a Japanese politician of the Japan Restoration Association and a member of the House of Representatives in the Diet, said self-reflection lays the foundation of Japan's prosperity, and that Japan had inflicted losses and misery on Asian countries. Meanwhile, your party's Secretary General, Keiichiro Asao, said Japan should wage no war against others in the future and work towards world peace and stability. Japan's Liberal Democratic Party since 2012 has called for lifting the ban on the right to collective self-defense. It also passed a cabinet resolution in July to drop a ban that has kept Japan's military from fighting overseas since World War II. And joining us now is Professor Shi Yinhong from Renmin University of China. Professor, thanks so much for joining us. Now, as we mentioned, Japanese politicians have visited the Yasukuni Shrine again. So how do these visits, or maybe pilgrimages, as you may put them, affect the relationships between Japan, and not only in China, Japan and